foreign policy. And we are really excited today to have Molly Hurley. You know, can a country's foreign policy be feminist if they have nuclear weapons? Well, we don't think so, and we're excited to hear what Molly says. And now with the Honduras recent ratification of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, the treaty reached the 50-state mark required for its entry into force. Why must we denuclearize is a major part of any feminist foreign policy. And that's why this is, super important to talk about. I just want to make a shout out to Katie Seeger. It's the last webinar that she's supporting for the feminist foreign policy. She's been with us since the beginning and is moving on, and we will definitely miss her. And tomorrow, the Code Pink radio show is on WBAI and WPFW at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's all about the feminist foreign policy. So you can check it out then, or I'm sure Katie will share it on all our social medias at Feminist for Paul on Twitter, and you can go to codepink.org/FFP to learn more. So Molly, welcome.
Thank you.
So Molly is a Prospect Hill Foundation's inaugural Nuclear Program Fellow and a recipient of Rice University's Wagner Fellowship. The Wagner Fellowship provides funding for Molly's current work studying nuclear weapons issues, movement building, and the role of art in both areas. The fellowship also provides funding for Molly to travel to Hiroshima, where next year she will continue her work. In addition to her fellowships, Molly serves as a fellowship associate with the grassroots organization and Code Pink Coalition partner, Beyond the Bomb. In this role, she helps foster the next generation of anti-nuclear activists by guiding them through Beyond the Bomb's seasonal fellowship program. And education is so important and a huge part of the needs for getting us to a feminist foreign policy. So Molly, you're amazing, and so excited that you're doing this work. As we know, when we started the feminist foreign policies, there's like so much work to do and to teach. So thank you. So let's start with the question, can a feminist foreign policy be feminist? Can a country's foreign policy be feminist if they have nuclear weapons?
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with Code Pink. I don't think so. And I think we can look at this both present day and historically. Nuclear weapons are just imbued in sexism. Nuclear weapons are and have always been a very gendered issue from the very birth of nuclear weapons, such as the Trinity test in 1945, when Truman was at the Potsdam Conference and we tested a nuclear weapon for the very first time in history. The code message for Truman to know whether or not the test was successful or unsuccessful was, it's a boy if it worked and it's a girl if it didn't. So just right from the onset of our nuclear history, there was this codification of gender around nuclear weapons, and this sort of masculinity, this institutional masculinity has been present in nuclear weapons policy ever since, from Truman on. And we can still see that today. In particular, especially recently, since Truman, but especially under Donald Trump, there's this sort of belief in a masculine type of diplomacy in which it's sort of our way or the highway, instead of a focus on multilateralism and diplomacy and compromise and negotiations. That's seen as weak and feminine, and the only right path forward is to exert our powerful masculine will on other countries and everything. And that's kind of the whole point of deterrence and deterrence theory, that because we get to have our fingers on the trigger, we get to control world politics and international relations. We have all the power, and everyone else kind of has to listen to us. And primarily that applies to the US, as we are kind of the hegemonic state of the world. But really it applies to any other nuclear armed state, is that possession of these nuclear weapons is imperialist, and anything that is imperialist is also inherently sexist, and it just really plays into this idea of might equals right.
Wow, and so beautifully said, thank you. And now, now they have women as the patriarchs carrying this out, which is, one of the campaigns we're working on right now. So what are the impacts of nuclear weapons on women that you've seen in your work?
Yeah, we can look at this at a few different angles. We can look at it just purely from the use of nuclear weapons, whether that was from the bombs being dropped in Japan or our nuclear testing. Mary Olson from Gender Radiation Projects, Gender Radiation Impact Project, I believe it is, has some really great resources on this. But the idea from her organization is that when we look at the biological effects of radiation exposure from nuclear weapons, we only ever look at it, we see it through a masculine lens as well, where we look at the radiation effects on a standard male human body. But this isn't the same for how it affects women and children, because just biologically, our bodies are biologically shaped differently from men, and we have different organs and everything, and especially for children, we're so much smaller and everything, that the same dose of radiation can have drastically different effects on women and children than it can on a man. And I mean, for example, just in Japan, I believe it was women had twice the likelihood of developing solid cancer from the bombs being dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki over men. And then we can also look at this as a generational thing, where women are the bearers of the next generation. And so we and our children are the ones that suffer the most from radiation exposure. We are the ones who end up, I don't want to say cursed, but cursed in a way of passing on these genes affected by radiation and these higher rates of cancer onto our children over men and everything. And this affects us generationally as well. And then we can look at it from a policy perspective as well, where at Beyond the Bomb, we like to say that the current regime that is currently in control of our nuclear weapons, at least in the US, but really all around the world, is that it's pretty pale, male, and stale. They're old, they're white, they're men. When do women get to enter the conversation? And this can apply to really any policy field, but this is particularly relevant to nuclear weapons because we are dealing with weapons of mass destruction right here. And then if we go so far into the future as a hypothetical of like, what if we do go to nuclear war? Well, women and children are going to be the ones that are most adversely affected. And it's not just women and children, but marginalized communities as well, because women are a marginalized community because we are already at a disadvantage societally. We will be even more at a disadvantage when resources become scarce. There's a nuclear winter, there's a worldwide famine. So social welfare systems collapse and everything. I'm not saying that and everything I'm saying, I'm not saying that men won't suffer, but there's just even more deeper levels to everything when it comes to women and marginalized community and children as well. Oh, you're muted.
We agree with you at Code Pink. When we started, it was that, we're feminists and it's not that we're better, but that women always pay a greater price with weapons and war. And we know that, women and children. And also just want to say that I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. And when I was born, my mother and grandmother took me to a picnic on a hill to watch a nuclear bomb explosion because they were tested there. And we all got cancer. So, and the air was blowing the other way. So we only got thyroid cancer. The people in Southern Utah died. And they were all women, and my friend Terry Tempest Williams has written a book about it, but it really did, the cancers affect the women much greater. So I'm a testament to that. None of the men in the family on the Hill got cancer. So thank you for bringing that up. It's very personal for me.
Mhm.
So what role do you see denuclearization taking on in the near future as the US is pushing for this new Cold War with China?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit like I said earlier, I feel like nuclear weapons are inherently imperialist, and definitely, the U.S. is at least today one of the biggest exporters of imperialism in the whole world, and our nuclear hegemony really reinforces that. I'm not saying that China is guiltless; they also have nuclear weapons, but one of the dynamic that we're looking at can be we can look at it as an example of like the modernization efforts that pretty much all the nuclear weapon states are undergoing for their nuclear weapons, and as well as everything that was happening with New START at the beginning of the year. The new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, New START, is the very last nuclear arms control agreement between the US and Russia. It will expire in February 2021. Biden has said that he aims to renew it. Previously, before we knew what was going to happen with the election, Trump was very hesitant to renew it unless it became a trilateral deal with the US, Russia, and China. China was very against this because they felt that it would be unfair, it would be asymmetrical, because China's nuclear arsenal is 1/20th the size of the US and Russia's if we include retired and non-deployed weapons. And so China's argument was basically like, we'll enter talks with you when your nuclear arsenal is on par with the size of our nuclear arsenal. And of course, it would be great to get any countries under some kind of nuclear arms control agreement. But this asymmetry in the relationship, where the US feels like it gets to tell China what to do, is one of the underlying things that is really igniting these aggressions towards China that I do feel are unfair. And I feel like and I feel like another big reason that we're doing this is because not necessarily is because China is a threat to us. It's a threat to our role as the number one superpower in the world. And I'm not saying that I want China to be the number one superpower in the world or anything, but like a much more sustainable path to the future is cooperation with China. We don't have to be number one. China doesn't have to be number one. Russia doesn't have to be number one. We don't necessarily have to have any number one in the world, if we can just have like cooperation. And we're constantly villainizing China and seeing them as the threat to us. But I think if we took a second to really understand things from a much more global perspective, that is how China views us. And even more so than just China, that's how North Korea and Iran see us. We are threats to their national security and their sovereignty. And that is really the whole reason, in my opinion, that North Korea is pursuing nuclear weapons in the first place, because we have always antagonized them and villainized them. And we've for decades now, there have been articles stipulating collapse in North Korea. And that's like the big hope, I think, is that North Korea collapses and we get to take over and turn it into an extension of South Korea, where we get to have extreme influence over their national security and everything. And so really, North Korea is just trying to protect itself from us. And yet that's what we picture ourselves as. Like, oh, we must have our like 6,000 nuclear weapons to protect ourselves from the rest of the world, even though Russia is the only other country with even close to the number of nuclear weapons that we have. So like, do other countries really pose this, huge threat that if we reverse it, we're the ones that pose the hugest threat, in my opinion. It's not China, and I'm not saying that these other countries can't do us harm, but I feel like we're just lacking a huge ton of perspective on where countries stand, and we're not even trying to empathize with the cultural understandings of these other countries and their history, and their thinking on everything. And in doing so, that doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but if we were to just be a little bit more cooperative and understanding and open-minded, then I think that can open the door to real diplomacy, and we could finally reach the goals that we want. Christine On from Women Across DMZ had a great quote when she was interviewed on Plowshares Fund Press the Button podcast. I'm going to paraphrase. Basically, she said that, the assumption right now is that we cannot have peace on the Korean Peninsula without denuclearization. But in truth, it should be the other way around. We cannot have denuclearization without peace. We need to end the Korean War. We need to develop true diplomatic relations such that we ease off on the sanctions, and in return, North Korea backs off on its nuclear program. And I feel like that kind of path is not just the path forward for North Korea, but it's a path for Iran. And that similar kind of mindset can be the path forward to reduce aggression with China.
Yes, very true. And, as you're talking, first of all, the Cold War is always driven by the US. It's not a Cold War, it's really an aggression by the US. And Russia didn't want to bomb the US, it wanted just to be safe. Mm-hmm. But it causes a lot of money and time and also terror. Mm-hmm. And here we are, everyone knew Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction because they bombed it. It's just like that was the first clue that they also knew they were lying, but they used that threat. And it's really how the US uses the threat to build up military spending. And, one of the things we hope to do is stop the new funds that are going into the trillion dollars that's just been assigned to more new nuclear weapons, while we already have way, way too many. And I think, the Cold War is always a way to get people to be afraid, both in the United States that allows more funding for the Pentagon. And then I think it's terrorizing for people who live in the entire Asian region. Because that's not something you want to do to human beings. So how can people get involved in the fight against nuclear weapons and getting us to peace so they're not needed to be hanging over our heads every day?
Yeah. I think that's a question with both a difficult and an easy answer. I think it's easy because like any issues, there are lots of resources out there to get involved, but then it's difficult because if you start to Google this stuff, it's actually really intimidating. Unfortunately, nuclear weapons issues, at least at first, can seem very inaccessible. There are so many acronyms, there's so much lingo and jargon and everything. And when you first try to enter this space, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with this. And at the same time, nuclear weapons seem like such a big existential threat that you think, what could I, as a single person, possibly even do towards this anyways? And you just feel a little bit of this fatalism, like we're doomed to this future, to a possible nuclear apocalypse sometime. And so particularly my work with Beyond the Bomb that's one of our most important things, is we want to help you learn and find your way into this space. First of all, we really want to emphasize the intersectionality of nuclear weapons issues, to help increase awareness and help you understand why you should be concerned. You could be concerned with literally any other issue area out there, whether it's racial, economic, or gender discrimination, injustice, or it's climate injustice and everything. All of those are tied in with our nuclear complex and everything. And progress on one of these issues, on the nuclear weapons issues, can represent progress in anything else. If we can prevent nuclear war, that also prevents a climate catastrophe. If we can get more women in the room when we're discussing nuclear policy, that can be progress for gender equality. Although I want to point out that it's really important that it's not just we have a woman in the room, but we have a feminist woman in the room. At Beyond the Bomb, we don't want it to be a woman who has her finger on the button. We want no one's finger to be on the button. And I think so it's really important that we keep in mind what kind of women we want, not just any woman. And in addition, if we want to seek racial or economic justice, if we, for example, there's the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, like we're trying to get amendments onto that or get it renewed or whatever, so that we can expand the population who is eligible for compensation to current populations that are being excluded from this. I mean, our whole history of nuclear weapons testing is extremely racialized. The Marshall Islands, the Navajo Nation, when it came to uranium mining, like these populations of color have suffered the most from our nuclear history. And so one form of racial justice that we can seek is compensating them for the suffering that we have caused them. And then economic injustice, if we can cut back on our nuclear budget or any amount of military spending, that is money that we could put towards social programs, whether it's healthcare or unemployment, or like you name it, anything that can address the huge economic inequalities that are plaguing our country right now. And I totally lost track of where I was going with this, but oh yeah, so I really encourage people to check out Beyond the Bomb. I think that we're a great first place to get started. We really do our best to make nuclear weapons issues, keep you up to date on them, but also make them digestible and easily understandable, because nuclear weapons issues are so intersectional. If you can get past the lingo and just get down to the root of the problem of what's going on, then it's really easy to understand why this issue should be so salient. And then of course, I love ranting about this stuff. So if anyone ever wants to reach out to me, they're welcome to check out the Beyond the Bomb website, beyondthebomb.org, or they can follow me on Twitter. It's just my name with an S in front of it on Twitter, or anyone on the Beyond the Bomb team is happy to help introduce you to this. But really, I think the first step to getting started in any space is find what you're passionate about. And don't be afraid to just do a ton of Googling. There are organizations everywhere that are working on this. Beyond the Bomb is not the only organization that is working on nuclear issues. There are so many groups out there. Just in Nebraska, I found out there's an organization called Nebraskans for Peace, and they have been anti-nuclear for decades now. And so which is where I am, I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. So even in, I'm going to be honest, my kind of middle of nowhere state, like we have an organization and a movement building against nuclear weapons. And it's been around for a long time, and we're going to continue to be around.
So, yeah, as you were talking about, it's a difficult issue, but it's a life and death issue. It's the future issue. And I think, I want to add to your list is like knowing about it, being in relationship with it helps with that anxiety, terror piece that then gets used against us. It's that hook that has been used by the Pentagon to grab a lot of money and grab a lot of terror and make people afraid. And to be engaged in anything to stopping it helps it not have power over you, because then you're in the power of like stopping it. So I just celebrate that you're doing this and making it so palatable and bringing young people into it. Yeah. And yes, one of the things that I think people don't know is the testing of nuclear weapons have killed 1 million people. That's 4 times the number of people who died in Japan. And yes, it's Black and brown people, it's poor people, it's really disgusting and horrific. what just the testing has done. So there are, you listed so many reasons, there are so many that it just needs to stop. It, and take our money away from it is right, because we need it for so many other things. And I just want to go back to another piece you said about, yes, it needs to be a feminist, and no one's finger on the button, but we need feminists at the table. And right now, Code Pink has a campaign. Michelle Flournoy, who's being put up for the Department of Defense, she is a warmonger in heels, as we say.
That's what I had in mind when I was talking about how I don't want just a woman on the button. Yes.
So people can go to codepink.org /nother. This is, super serious, because we need to definitely stop the $1 trillion that's assigned to the new programs. It's not necessary. And yes, I'm for what China says. Everybody needs to come down to their level, because we don't want China to have to spend the money, because when you start a Cold War towards a country, they're responsible to their citizens to do what needs to be done to protect their citizens. And that's just money that needs to be spent in all countries for the people, not for these insane weapons that we need to stop. So is there anything else you want to tell the community? They're all going to be following you, I'm sure. You're so brilliant. And so I'm so excited you're on this work.
Yeah, thank you. I think the final message I really want people to come away with is that you can have agency in these issues. Like I said, it seems so existential and like you have no power over this. But I think nuclear weapons are very, very closely tied and similar to the climate crisis issue. This is a very existential threat, and it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. But without a grand concerted effort from everyone, then we'll never see progress. And we are seeing this building of this movement, of the grand concerted effort that we need to see, the Sunrise Movement and everyone else. And this is so hugely powered by young people. We do have potential for progress and hope for the future. And so just like the climate crisis, the movement for climate justice and everything, that is what we need to happen with nuclear justice. Young people are the future, not just because the future is what's most relevant to us, because we're the ones that are going to have to live with the future, but as we can see, we are driving history right now, today, with our voices, and we can do this. We've been doing this for racial justice with Black Lives Matter. We've been doing this for climate justice. We can do this for nuclear justice too. And nuclear weapons aren't going to disappear overnight, but they will one day if we just keep being annoying and we don't shut up, which is what I plan on doing. So.
I'm so grateful for that. Molly Hurley, you are amazing. Thank you so much for what you're doing for peace on the planet. And so folks can follow you at Smolly Hurley. Is that SMOLLYHUR?
In high school, a friend called me Smolly Molly, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. And so now that's my handle. But yeah, it's just my name with an S in front of it.
It's cool. So it's good. Molly Hurley with an S in front of it. And, please follow this woman. She's we need more rock stars for peace. Definitely what the world needs right now is, as you said, cooperation, diplomacy, and not driving people to war. So thanks for being with us. And everyone can follow the Feminist Foreign Policy at Feminist for Paul. And please do something for peace today, because it brings us more life. Thank you. Bye.